And now your host of Where's My Parachute? It's Steve Lemieux.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Dr. Adams is like, oh, God, what did I get myself into in the intro like that? That was our very first guest provided that intro suggesting that he fell out of an airplane without his parachute opening. So that's where that came from.
We might want to think about redoing that one day.
Oh, come on, man. It's a legacy deal now for him.
That's true.
It's
yeah,
probably the only thing he has.
You're not wrong on that. I don't think you're wrong on that at all.
All right, we got Aaliyah with us again today.
Hey.
Welcome back. Thank you. We have special guest Scott Chronister live with his Dallas Cowboy hat on because he's from Chicago and he's such a huge Cowboys fan. I'm super psyched about that. And Dr. Ken Adams, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Man, I'm glad you're here. We will have a lot to cover and not very much time, but let's just start off with tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and where you're at now. And I know we've got a bunch of topics that we can go into, but why don't we start there?
All right. Well, since we're talking about legacy, there are 7 generations of Presbyterian ministers in my family, and I joke that I'm probably the only person who ever became a doctor and disappointed his dad. I was the last of 5 boys, and none of them became ministers, and neither did I. Grew up, was born in Japan, and spent the first 8 years of my life in New Mexico, and moved to Texas in 1980, and I've been here ever since. Sooner or later, I'll have to say I'm a Texan, but have lived in Dallas for the majority of that, and am a physician by training, but haven't really practiced active medicine since about 2005 or so. I've been in corporate leadership roles since then. Some startups have been in everything from I'm the only employee where I'm emptying the trash can and running the company, to working in large 23,000 employee companies, publicly traded, as their chief medical officer.
Right on. And so right now, I know you're affiliated with UT Southwestern.
I'm technically a clinical associate faculty there. Okay. But that's just a title.
Okay. All right. And so what's your other than maybe what you're doing with your daughters that we'll get into, what's your day today look like right now?
At the moment, I'm doing a lot of hanging out at Starbucks.
Nice.
We were in the midst of a fundraise for a company that we kind of pulled the plug on May 31st. We couldn't make all our filings for insurance for Illinois. So we're just, I turned some of the potential future customers into consulting clients, and at the moment I'm just being a consultant.
Yeah. So truly, you've got the entrepreneurial blood running,
absolutely.
Pulsing. Yeah.
Ever since I was a little kid.
Yeah. Cool. What is, give us some of your highlights on some of the companies you've been involved in and maybe some of you just gave us a lower view of one that you pulled the plug on, although sometimes that's the best day of a company's life is when it's kind of like a boat, right? It's your 2 happiest days are when you buy the boat and when you sell the boat. It's like when you start it and then when you decide, okay, this isn't going to happen, so we got to shut it up and figure it out.
Yeah, it's important, I think, to know when to say you're done instead of dragging things out. And this one actually, it still has a lot of legs to it, and we're still going down that road. What was interesting, we were trying to put together a population health management company where we're taking care of a population of about 10,000 patients up in the Chicago area. And I think where the investors were kind of balking is none of us within the organization had specifically done this. A number of us had been parts of different organizations that took care of patients and did population health management. And interestingly, right after we pulled the plug, I got hired as a consultant, chief medical officer for an insurance plan.
Oh, wow.
So now we do have an individual, me, who has specifically done what we're going to be doing in the future.
Right.
So it's all working out the way it's supposed to work out.
Yeah, cool.
I don't stress about it too much.
Yeah, good. It's funny. So I hit that roadblock a lot in my career because I'll be raising money for something. I don't know, maybe a restaurant or something. And the question is, how many times have you done this? I'm like, you know what's awesome? I haven't done it, which means I have totally fresh eyes.
Right.
Spin.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's a tough one. But the truth is that spin sometimes is exactly what it needs. It needs a fresh set of eyes that hasn't done it, so that we don't have the blind spots that the guys that are doing it and unsuccessful at it are doing. Right?
Agreed.
Yeah. So cool. And then some of the more memorable ones that maybe you've been involved in that were exciting.
Well, I'm thinking back when I was 14, I got my first job at McDonald's and worked there a total of maybe a week and a half before the general manager out in Irving, who owned 3 or 4 of them, approached me and said, hey, I'd love you to be the manager here at McDonald's. And can I send you off to Hamburger University? That's a real thing. And I had to tell him I was only 14. And
wow.
That was a great eye opener to why do you stay in school and
right. Yeah.
you don't want to do this the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's kind of I had a similar situation right out of college where I started a job in sales, and within 9 months I was the number 3 salesperson in the company, and everybody was like mid 40s to mid 60s, and I thought, I think there's probably something else for me.
Right.
If you're asking me to be the manager at 14 after a few weeks.
What was great, though, actually, is that, as I'm running the window and looking out the window and watching the guy mowing the lawn out there, I asked the general manager shortly after that first conversation, I was like, who does your lawn? And he told me and told me how much he spends, and I was like, I'll do it for half that. And right after that, started doing commercial lawn mowing and hiring all my friends at $5 an hour, which back in 1980 was huge money for these kids. And I'm sitting back and enjoying my life, making money off of other people. It was good times back then.
So that's the bug.
Yeah, that is.
So how did you go from that to pre-med and med school? I mean, that seems like a exact opposite track almost.
Well, so I think I might have mentioned I was born in Japan. So I have an Asian mother. So if anyone else out there has an Asian mother, you know that she's probably determined what you're going to be. And I was told I was going to be a doctor.
Right.
And, at the end of the day, I think that I can't think of another degree that offers kind of the end outcome that I've experienced. I have 2 letters behind my name that tell 3 things about me that may not actually be true, that I'm hardworking, that I'm smart, and that I'm generally altruistic.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of 2 other letters that you can have behind your name that convey that to you. So I've told my daughters, I was like, I don't care what you become. If you want to be a school teacher, if you want to drive a dump truck, just get your MD first. And then go and do whatever you want with your life.
Just take that little step.
Because
it
just opens so many doors, and it provides a different playing field for whatever you want to do.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I do have to cover this real quickly because I didn't know you grew up in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd you grow up?
So I lived for the first couple of years of my life in a little town called Placitas, about 20 miles outside of Albuquerque.
Mm-hmm.
We literally had a dirt floor house. We had an outhouse out back, and my mom's stove, or not her stove, her oven was an outdoor wood-burning oven.
Wow.
4-room house.
So wealthy.
Oh, yeah.
Upbringing.
Oh, yeah. We had a yacht. We had not.
Wow. And then where else did you go around New Mexico? Pretty much stay in the Albuquerque area?
Yeah, I stayed. My mom grew up actually very wealthy in Japan and was pretty insistent that she have running water within the house and a toilet. So we eventually moved to Albuquerque.
There you go.
But spent a lot of time up in northwestern New Mexico in a place called Ghost Ranch, Presbyterian Conference Grounds.
Yeah.
And learned how to ride horses, drive trucks, round up cattle, castrate bulls, you name it, and I've done it.
That's cool. So we share that in common. So I grew up the castrate bulls. Scott Cronister won't get close to the microphone, but he'll laugh. I grew up in southeastern New Mexico.
Okay.
So I was I grew up half the time I grew up in a small town, Roswell. You've heard of Roswell, and then I grew up from kind of early teens. The rest of my time there was on a ranch between Roswell and Artesia.
Have you seen UFOs?
I have seen plenty of UFOs. Most of those were down at the river after a couple of beers.
Excellent.
So cool. Well, so I mentioned this earlier, and and I've seen your daughters several times, and I know that you have nothing to do with this. You don't participate in it. It doesn't create 80 hours of work a week for you. But your daughters have come and spoken at a couple of events that I've been at, and makes me feel it makes me feel great about humanity, and makes me feel completely horrible about myself, what I've done in life. You want to talk about changing the world. I mean, some people, the conscious capitalism movement, right? So I'm active in that and I love it. And we talk about recycling, or we talk about, whatever we're doing with, building one house in Mexico with some of our profits and things of that nature. And your daughters are changing the world, and it's super cool. And so the plug for Paper for Water, and Isabel, Catherine, and Trinity is now pretty active in it. How old is she?
She is 8 years old.
Okay.
And will be 9 shortly.
So she's got her fingers moving rapidly.
Does.
And so I would love to have them on the show at some point. I think it'd be awesome. But so tell me, I mean, they obviously got the entrepreneurial bug big time from it's in the blood.
Yeah, so when they were 3 and 5 years old, we were up in D.C. at the Oriental Market up there, and they saw these wooden cutout dogs that were beautifully painted, and my daughter wanted one and was pretty insistent, and I looked at the price tag. It was $50, and I was going to have to carry it back on a plane with me, and I said, you know what, we'll make them at home. So the following weekend, my wife was out of town that weekend, and because of course she'd never let them operate a jigsaw or get as dirty as they were when they painted them. But they cut these wooden dogs out of plywood, and then they painted them white and put their handprints all over them, and we called them Dogs Looking for a Handout. And they were really actually kind of cute.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
And they did that. They so loved doing it that the next literally 4 or 5 weekends in a row, that's all we did on Saturdays was paint these silly little dogs. And eventually my wife pulled me aside and she's like, Ken, we don't have any more wall space for these dogs, so you got to figure out what you're going to do with them. So I had my 5-year-old daughter run up to the local Starbucks. We knew the manager up there, and she had her little cutout dog, and she looked at him really cute and sweet and said, you have all these other artists in here selling their artwork. Can I sell my artwork in here? And, what's he going to say?
Yeah.
So he said, I'll tell you what, I'll work you a deal. You invite all your friends from your preschool and kindergarten on a Saturday, and I will provide the food. You just get all your friends to buy a drink, and we'll show your artwork. Well, so he took all the food that was going to expire on Sunday,
right,
and gave it out as free food, and all of her friends ordered drinks. It was his most successful Saturday ever. And the girls sold almost over $800 worth of these dogs.
Wow.
And they had so much fun doing it. And so I said, you can each keep 10% for yourselves, put in your piggy bank, and then you each take 10% and give it to the church. And the residual, $500 or $600, they took a check down to Children's Medical Center and donated it. The president of the hospital came down. They took pictures of them. I mean, they had so much fun doing that. They said, we got to do a horse show. So they made, for the subsequent next, 2 months or so, they made these wooden cutout horses. And the art product was so much better than the dogs. They decoupaged them. They found horse coins and stamps, and they just had these cool things. But the problem is they tapped out all their friends' parents on the dogs. So the next horse show, they still made about $500. It was still a good showing. So they had this concept of, despite the fact we're little kids, we can make stuff that people want. And so that was where my middle daughter, actually, she was, I believe, 6 at the time, or 4 at the time. I taught her how to make these little origami ornaments. And she just took off with it. It took her about a week to make one. It takes her now about a little less than an hour to make one. So it would take about a week. She gave one to the pastor. She gave one to her teacher, church secretary, the librarian. And she ran out of people to give them to, and they started amassing around the house. And once again, my wife stepped in, and she's like, you got to figure out something to do with these ornaments. We don't have enough space anymore. So this time, the middle daughter, Catherine, she went to the Starbucks manager and said, hey, we're pretty successful. We've done 2 of these shows already. Can we do a third one? And this time he said, I'll give you the whole month.
Wow.
So we had a tenant out in one of our garage apartments who had just been down to Guatemala on a water dig with Living Water International. And so she heard the girls were going to do another art show and sell their stuff, and that they hadn't picked out a charity yet. So she tried to convince them to get involved in this water charity. And the way she sold it to them was, she said, girls in developing countries don't get to go to school because they're hauling water all day. And that just made the girls pissed. I mean, they were upset because they're like, number one, why aren't the boys helping out? And number two, they love school. They just enjoyed it. And they're like, that's so unfortunate. The kids don't get to go to school. So they committed to raising $500 towards a $9,200 deep water well in Africa. And after the first night of selling, they'd raised almost $1,000.
Wow.
And they had the whole month. So they're like, I think we can raise the $9,200.
Wow.
And
from a 4-year-old, 5-year-old.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And by the end of December, they had actually raised $10,000 and had overfunded their first well.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
How do you teach those lessons? Like, what do you think is, like, what seeds did you and Deborah plant?
Yeah, so my wife and I have been kind of intentional about this. We sat down and we both have talked so much about our upbringing. My wife grew up in a trailer home. Her dad had her cleaning out burnt out trailer homes every weekend, and they would resell the cleaned out trailer home. And likewise, I just mentioned I grew up really poor, and my earliest memories are being at the Salvation Army with my father, who's a pastor, handing out clothes, and at soup kitchens handing out foods. Those are my earliest memories of hanging out with my family. And both of us firmly believe that is what made us who we are today. And neither of us wants to go back to that. Neither of us wants to go live in a trailer home or in a dirt floor home. So how do we recreate those scenarios for our kids? And that's what we've been trying to be really intentional about. But the problem is, I think in the general public, there's not that opportunity for little kids to volunteer. I mean, Habitat, you have to be 16, and most of the soup kitchens around here, you have to, be 10 or 12 or something like that. So there really wasn't something for little kids to do. And that's why we started thinking about how can we teach them simple business skills. I mean, my favorite story about the girls after their first night of selling ornaments, I brought them home and I sat them down after action review and said, what went well today? What do we need to do differently? And they both looked at me and they're like, well, duh, Dad, we're going to make more ornaments. And I said, no, you got to raise your prices. And we actually drew a little line graph with a crayon, and over the next 2 months raised prices twice. So we talked about supply and demand. That was at the point where I'm like, here's a 4 and a 5-year or 6-year-old that actually are getting supply and demand because they're participating in it. They understand it. And so as we moved Paper for Water kind of from just being this one-night event to being a 2-month event, in the back of my mind, it's always been about how do I teach my kids business skills in a way that they understand and that they can repeat. And that's kind of how things have developed. And obviously the not-for-profit side of it and how big this has gotten, it's exceeded my wildest dreams.
Unbeknownst to you.
I had no idea.
I'm teaching them business skills. Yeah.
How many wells have you guys funded now?
So the girls have raised about $1.7 million and have funded over 170 water projects in 17 countries. We just added our 17th country a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. That's the part
awesome.
That makes me feel like crap. Right? You're like,
it's like that part.
You write your check to the church every Sunday and you're like, I'm awesome. And then you hear this story and go, wow, I'm not great at all. Like I could do so much. We could all do so much more, right? There's so much within us. And I know Aaliyah and I talk about this a lot at the office, just about, personal and professional development. And then with the conscious capitalism movement and how much, change the world, you change it one person at a time, but we all get together and have that same vision and it changes, and I mean, your daughters are just doing awesome work, and I know that that they have a ton of support from you. So I love putting them on stage. The first time I saw them at the reunion and they talked, and I'm sitting there looking at you going, oh gosh, I mean, that's not the girls just getting up there and doing all their stuff. I know that's a tremendous amount of work and effort and what you've given up as well. I mean, last time we talked about how your house is a factory, just tables covered with paper and glue and whatever else the other supplies are that's in there.
It's crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
Our whole house is a warehouse essentially. Fortunately we keep our bedrooms relatively free of paper for water stuff, but
Mhm.
the entire downstairs is 2,000 square feet of just paper for water.
So we still do need an office space.
Yeah, we still do, and we've kind of put it a little bit on hold. We have a Neiman Marcus delivery that happened today, and that has been a significant push the last couple of months. But my oldest daughter, it was cool. So I don't think we really talked about. We spent 8 months traveling around the world,
Right.
And every opportunity we had to pop into some small business owner or talk to them about what they did behind the scenes, we took that advantage, and the kids love that kind of stuff. I mean, we visited chocolatiers, we rose growers, leather makers, etc. So we're traveling across Russia, which is massive, 6,000 miles on the Trans-Siberian Express, a lot of downtime, and my oldest daughter slides up next to me and she says, Dad, I've been thinking about this for a long time. And paper for water doesn't have a sustainable business model. And I'm just basking in this proud dad moment. My 13-year-old daughter has used those big words correctly.
Where's the Xbox, Dad? Where's the Xbox? That's what 90% of the people hear.
And so I'm trying to figure like, how do I continue this conversation and make it meaningful for her? So I'm like, what do you want to do? How do you want to fix that? And she's like, well, Dad, I think we need to start a for-profit business where 30 to 50% of the proceeds actually go to funding our executive director and programs and rent and all those kinds of things. And I'm like, well, that's a great idea. What do you want to do? And she says, well, I think that leather goods have a ridiculous markup. You think about your Coach purse, it's $2,000 that actually costs $30 or $40 to make. And obviously there's all that marketing and advertising on the front end of that makes those such desirable objects. But she said, at the end of every school year, I have these a canvas backpack that I have to throw away. I mean, it's holes in it's torn. The zippers don't work anymore. I can't even upcycle it or recycle it. I just have to throw it away. She said, I want to make a backpack like the Japanese kids have that lasts 4 years. It's beautiful. It's functional. It's made of leather, and we'll charge $400 or $500 for it. We'll get women here in the United States that are immigrants or need second chance women who are just been released from prison or something who need a skill. We'll have them make it and pay them a living wage and just have a great product. And I'm like, wow, you're 13 years old. You've thought this all through.
That's insane.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of, I don't know if it was the Latin American entrepreneurs or who it was that I met through EO, but there was a, heck, it could have been on Shark Tank. I can't remember. But I'd like it to be more personal than that, but it might not have been. But they were doing something, either socks or some kind of backpacks or something like that, where they were going to the countries and having, these in these small villages and having the mostly the wives, because the husbands were out gathering and hunting and doing whatever, right. Having the wives produce this, and then they were given X amount of it back to the, they were actually part owners of the company or profit sharing in the company or something like that. So that's really cool.
Well, have you met Veronica Londano? She's the CEO for American Leather.
I have, yeah. I know Veronica, yeah.
Well, so we, obviously got in touch with her, and the girls got to go down and tour her factory. Amazing factory, and just a great company.
And she knows every single person's name on the floor, man. She is unbelievable.
Oh, she's amazing.
Yeah,
and
love that woman.
Awesome mentor for the girls. They just had such a wonderful time down there. And she says, actually what Isabel and Catherine are trying to do actually meets a need of hers. Because she said sewing is a dying art in the United States, but leather sewing is a dead art. And she can't find people who have the skill set to sew her furniture. So she said, she's going to try to figure out how she can help us to create a pool of people that she can employ. Because obviously sewing leather backpacks isn't going to take the skill set that sewing leather furniture does, but it's a great training ground. So they work for us for 6 months, and then they get hired by American Leather, and if they want to work overtime, they come back and work for whatever leather company name.
Leather for water.
Well, actually, Isabel has a name for it.
Uh-oh.
It's kind of funny because she says, I want to call the company Milmo. I rolled my eyes. I'm like, okay, this better have a good story behind it because that's a goofy name. And she says, well, I'm always listening to you and your friends talk about how difficult the millennial generation is and how you can't get them to work before 10 o'clock in the morning, and they show up on the second day and they already want vacation. And she said, Catherine and I have been working for Paper for Water for 7 years now, and we know that it takes hard work. We're up until 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, putting in the hours. And it takes hard work to do these kinds of things. Things just don't come to you for free. So MILMO stands for Millennials Move Over, because Gen Z is here to fix the day.
Wow.
And I
like
said,
it.
I hate her even more now.
Oh, stop.
That is so awesome.
She
so
says,
good.
I told her, I was like, I think you'll get investors just off the name.
Oh, 100%. That's really cool.
That is
That's
really
very cool. They're just great. It's insightful. It's so exciting. I mean, so I knew we were going to talk about your daughters and family, and so that's why I wore my Harry Potter shirt today, because
she loves Harry Potter.
we did the Disney vacation this summer, as I roll my eyes, and so my 8-year-old. So I did two things with my kids. One, my 8-year-old got a Harry Potter shirt, and I decided that I would do the same, and so we could be twins. And then my daughter and I went and got a pedicure together, and she made me get Dominus blue painted toenails.
Excellent.
Which I did, and got.
So you didn't tell that part of the story, Steve.
Yeah. Well, I don't come to the office in flip-flops often, but when I do, my toes are shining blue. Yeah. So I guess, and I know that, I've thought about the take off a year and travel the world, and I know several friends that have done that, and just unbelievable experiences. One lady came and said, one lady that did it said that she got into this big argument with another friend of hers because the friend was like, "What are you going to do for school? And don't you care about their education?" And and then she goes through, well, let's see, we went to. We went here and there, and we learned science this way, and we learned math this way, and we, and just went through the whole everything that they learn, and it's 12 years of education and a year journey around the world. So I'm sure that was fun. But tell me, aside from that, what do you guys do as a family when you're not folding paper and having business discussions with 10-year-olds?
We sleep.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah. Actually, we just spent this last week in New Mexico, hiking, biking,
Cool.
hanging out, horseback riding. The girls are avid horsewomen, and the ranch that we go to, they love working at the stables there. So there's a lot of things that we do. We spend a lot of time outside doing stuff.
Yeah.
We unplugged our TV 14 years ago.
Wow.
So we don't have a TV in the house. We do have a screen, so we do see movies every now and then. The kids are all device free, much to my oldest daughter's horror. She over the last couple of months, she's gotten a little bit more insistent that she needs something, but that just makes me dig my heels even further. It creates a household where we have great conversations and actually talk about meaningful stuff.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
It is.
So I'm a huge advocate of that. We have not turned off our TV, and we have a couple of screens and a couple of TVs in the house, but we try very hard to, this weekend my kids didn't watch any TV at all.
That's awesome.
They're outside. I think that it's so important to engage in dialogue, and not that my kids are changing the world with Paper for Water, and not to embarrass you, but I think that when I see our children around other children, I know that we've done a good job. And how important it is. I love the stuff that you're bringing in, because Dana and I have been talking about this lately, of how do we bring in more business, as opposed to, it's time for me to buy school clothes. I want to buy school clothes, or I need this, or I need that. How do we really start bringing in the value of money and what you have to do to get to it? And then how do you give back, right? What's important? And I think, we've done quite a bit of the giving back.
Mm-hmm.
Part of our nightly ritual is talking about what we're going to do tomorrow to help someone else, who's fallen or been made fun of, or whatever, and how we we live as that example. But I think bringing in the true business piece is important, because truly our jobs are not to be friends and not to be tight and not to be close and not to be cuddly, although all those things are fun. But really our job is to make them successful adults.
Right. Prepare them for the
and
real
allow
world.
them to move on.
Well, Steve, just real quick, I know Dana was talking about, like, no.
Don't put me.
No, no,
I'm the interviewer.
Vivian, so Vivian, his oldest daughter, actually loves cutting the lawn.
Yeah.
Like, she loves it.
Yeah.
Because it's part of her, it's not an allowance. You guys don't call it that. You call it something else, but it's part of how she contributes to the household.
Yeah.
So you guys have a different way of implementing some really interesting parenting principles that I think are really, like, innovative. you
Yeah,
know?
thankfully for Dana, because I probably would have plugged in the TV and said, "Leave me alone, Wayne." But yeah, no, I mean, our kids have their chores. They have to read a certain amount. My kids, well, my youngest is getting there, but my two older, my 14 and 10-year-old, are both like voracious readers. I mean, Lillian she's 10 and she's finishing the Harry Potter series for the second time now. She started when she was like 5-ish,
Awesome.
And Vivian's the strongest reader. She read Dante's Inferno when she was 9.
Wow.
And she's now reading what's the Count of Monte Cristo?
Oh,
So
unabridged or bridged?
Unabridged.
Oh, that's awesome.
1,400 pages or
Yeah.
something. And she's
Wow.
like, "This book's really long." I'm like, "What page are you on?" 800. I'm like, that's more than I read in all of college.
we need to get her and Isabel together, because she read the abridged version twice and now finished the unabridged version. She did War and Peace while we're traveling
Oh,
across
yeah.
Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love, I mean, and it's funny because sometimes I'm like, "Vivian, put the book down."
Right.
And like, I feel so stupid saying that. It's like, turn off the TV, but it's like, put the book down. We're having a family dinner and we want you to but thank God it's that over the other. So
Exactly.
either it's in their genes from their mom or we're doing something right. But it's so cool to just watch the kids grow up and know that we gave them the basis. If they screw up from here, then it's
It's
their
their
fault.
fault.
but at this point we're good. So cool. Well, man, I always hate to cut it off because the conversation is so awesome, but
What? Already time?
it's see, I told you, it's already past time. But I'd like to thank Scott Cronister for his input. Just
Thank you for the invitation.
absolutely, there we go. Everybody heard his radio voice. Dr. Ken Adams, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
thanks so much and I'll tell them in person when we see them, but for everything your daughters are doing. It not only is it helping a lot of people, but man, it really is changing the world, and they set a great example for other kids. And Aaliyah, good to see you. And Mr. Matt Stoker, who I always have
Yes.
to mention at the end because I forget.
I
I get
appreciate it.
nervous when the guy screams.
Oh, at the beginning?
Yeah, and so I forget to say.
Yeah.
But
Well, again, I mean, we can always remake that if you want to, but
we'll figure it out.
if you like the legacy of it, I understand.
Thanks so much. You think Ken's daughters have done anything worthwhile?
Gosh, I need to go reevaluate a few things.
Exactly. All right, man. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.